All right, welcome to today's Explainer. I want you to get in the zone right now. Study smart, fly safe. Today we are focusing purely on your private pilot check ride preparation. I want you to imagine we're sitting in the briefing room right now. Your aircraft is out on the ramp and your examiner's waiting. We're going to do a hyper-focused pre-flight briefing strictly covering the absolute essential acronyms you need to pass your oral exam. So take a deep breath, focus your mind, and let's get you ready for the left seat.
We're going to follow a really straightforward, logical framework today. Number 1, pilot readiness. Number 2, aircraft airworthiness. 3, pre-flight action. And finally, number 4, a sharp focus on the DPE oral exam. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, pilot readiness, focusing on SMILE and Iamsafe. So, the whole foundation of your pre-flight inspection really starts with two key acronyms you've got to know cold: SMILE and Iamsafe. As you can see, FAR 61.3 strictly governs what a pilot needs. The FAA, well, they definitely don't leave this to guesswork. It's a rigid, legal framework, and you absolutely must have it memorized. Breaking down FAR 61.3, we use SMILE to prove you are legally permitted to fly the airplane. S is your student pilot certificate. M is your medical certificate, the one approved by an aviation medical examiner. I is your standard government-issued ID. Now pay super close attention to the L and the E. That's your logbook and your instructor's endorsement. Listen, for a student pilot getting ready to solo, if you don't have that specific logbook endorsement literally on your person, that's an instant grounding. There is zero negotiation there. Now, while SMILE makes you legally ready, Iamsafe is what makes you physically and mentally safe to fly. This right here is the FAA's Aeronautical Decision-Making, or ADM checklist for pilot self-assessment. Before you even think about taking those controls, you have to run through illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and eating or emotion. Trust me, if you're compromised in even one of these areas, your decision-making in the cockpit is going to be flawed. So the absolute crucial point here is how the FAA strictly regulates the A in Iamsafe, alcohol. Under FAR 91.17, there is literally no gray area. You have to observe a minimum of 8 hours from, as we say, bottle to throttle, and your blood alcohol content has to be below a maximum of 0.04%. Both of these conditions have to be met to be legally and safely compliant. Period.
Moving right along to Section 2, aircraft airworthiness, looking at the AERO acronym.
So, how do we prove the plane is safe? We use the AERO acronym, which is governed by FAR 91.203. You're going to need the airworthiness certificate, the registration certificate, a radio station license, the operating limitations, which you'll usually find in the pilot's operating handbook, or POS, and finally, your weight and balance data. Oh, and it's super vital to remember that specific placards and your compass deviation card, the stuff you'd see right on the panel of a Cessna, those are legally required parts of your operating limitations too.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it holds the key to a classic trick question you'll get from designated pilot examiners. There's a huge fundamental difference in expiration rules here. Your airworthiness certificate actually has no expiration date. It's totally valid as long as the aircraft is maintained according to the FARs. But that registration certificate, it absolutely expires. It has to be renewed every 3 years. And if you're using a temporary registration, that's only good for 30 days. So whatever you do, don't let the examiner trip you up on that one.
Let's also quickly clear something up about the second R in AERO, the radio station license. You actually don't need a radio station license for domestic flights within the United States, but the very second your flight plan takes you international, boom, that document is strictly required.
All right, Section 3, pre-flight action, focusing on NWKRFT and NOTAMs.
Now we're moving into the NW craft requirements and NOTAM breakdowns. Honestly, this is arguably the most dense, information-heavy part of your pre-flight action. As pilot in command under FAR 91.103, you are legally required to be familiar with all available information concerning your flight. And trust me, examiners love to dig deep into these specific details.
Think of WNCAFT as your ultimate pre-flight action checklist. Let's break it down. N is for NOTAMs. W is weather, specifically your METARs and TAFs. K is known ATC delays. R covers your runway lengths at all intended airports. A is for alternate airports, just in case things don't go as planned. F is fuel requirements, and T is your calculated takeoff and landing distances. You want to approach this like a flowing checklist. You have to meticulously gather every single one of these 7 elements before you even think about turning the key.
Let's zoom in a bit on fuel requirements. The rules for VFR fuel reserves at normal cruising speed are incredibly strict. For day VFR, you've got to carry enough fuel to reach your destination, plus an additional 30 minutes of reserve fuel. But once that sun goes down, your margin of safety has to increase. For night VFR, that requirement bumps up to an extra 45 minutes of reserve fuel. Make sure you visualize that difference. It is absolutely critical for your flight planning.
And this brilliantly illustrates the W and NWK FTR, weather reporting. You really have to know the difference between what's happening right now versus what's predicted to happen. So a METAR, that's an hourly observation of the current conditions right at the field. A TAF, on the other hand, is issued 6 times a day and gives you a forecast valid for a 24 to 30-hour period. Simply put, one tells you the present and the other predicts the future.
Finally, the NOTAMs. You've got distant NOTAMs, which cover things like navigational aids, runway closures, basically issues within 5 nautical miles. Military and international NOTAMs apply to those specific domains. But listen, I want to loudly warn you about FDC NOTAMs. These carry serious regulatory weight because they contain instrument approach procedure changes and temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs. Honestly, accidentally busting a pop-up VIP TFR because you forgot to check your FDC NOTAMs, that's a surefire way to see flashing lights on the ramp and pretty much ruin your pilot career, so check them carefully.
Okay, Section 4, DPE Oral Exam Focus, Mastering the Questions.
All right, we've reviewed the knowledge. Now I really want you to mentally connect with these elements because this right here is where theoretical knowledge becomes practical application. This is your dedicated DPE review. Let's test your recall right now in the hot seat.
Okay, picture this. You're sitting across the table. The examiner looks right at you and asks, what are the exact alcohol limitations before a flight? Take a second. Retrieve that answer.
And the answer you're going to deliver confidently is 8 hours bottle to throttle and a maximum blood alcohol content of 0.04%. Remember, under FAR 91.17, absolutely both of these strict conditions have to be met.
Let's move to and see how this builds into another classic scenario. The examiner asks, where exactly will you find information about a sudden temporary flight restriction, or TFR?
FDC NOTAMs, issued by the Flight Data Center. You'll want to remind the examiner that because TFRs are regulatory, they are always published as FDC NOTAMs. That proves you know exactly where to look to keep your flight safe and legal.
Well, we've covered the pilot, the plane, and the plan. You know SMIL, Iamsafe, Aero, and NW Craft. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ask yourself as you prepare. Are you physically, legally, and mentally ready for your check ride? Keep reviewing these acronyms until they literally become second nature. Study smart, fly safe. Now go out there and ace that check ride. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.